Hi everyone, it's Jerry. This is Game 10 from the 2012 Fide World Chess Championship match. Going into this round, both players remain level at 4.5 points each, and Anand on the white end in this game opens up with e4. A move he had played earlier in the match. In Game 5, he played e4, and in response to it, Gelfand ran with the Sicilian defense. This Game 10 is no exception, still sticking with c5 is Gelfand, and following up knight f3, knight c6. Still the same moves going on as in Game 5, but on this next move things are changing. Game 5 saw d4 and the game steered into Viswanathan Sicilian, but after now bishop b5 we're heading into the Rossolimo variation. Now there are several options for black at this moment. I'll just touch on a handful. There are d6, e6, g6, knight f6. And the move played the most from this position is e6, and it's the one that Gelfand runs with. Now, the intention with e6, you might think, is to allow for the bishop to come out, but it's more of a case of allowing the knight to pivot on e7 and have these guys connected. If white doesn't act fast, these knights could be connected, and if there's ever then, let's say, a bishop for knight capture, the knight is, of course, then in a position to recapture, and there will be no structural defect on the black queen side. But before that knight does jump in to this e7 square, Anand does run with this imbalance, this bishop for knight exchange, compromising the black structure in some way. And so as a follow-up now, we have b3. There are other options. There's castle, there's d3, and the move played in the game, b3. And now we have something very interesting, e5 being played at this moment. Looks like a free pawn, but of course it's going to be won back after a handful of moves, as we will see. And I had wondered something here. I was a bit curious at this moment right now. How things played out in the game was knight takes, the bishop, the queen comes out, the bishop guards the knight. The knight ends up getting kicked around a bunch of times. But before I get into that, I was a bit curious because I thought to myself, why even give white, let's say, the option to go ahead and grab that pawn? Why not just, let's say, play a move like d6, let's say after, okay, white castles, then go with e5, and you get a nice structure here on the black side. There's a nice grip going on over this d4 square. Follow-up moves might include knight f6, bishop e7, castle. Everything seems nice and compact. This is a good setup for black. So I began to question things. I wondered, what are the differences? What might d6 right here allow white to then do differently? Well, there might be the possibility for, let's say, e5, messing with the black structure, trying to make it be a case where these guys become double isolated. Should black run with d takes e, there's some really interesting stuff that I ended up coming across, and just by being curious about this position, I found a really cool trap. I don't know if it's already known or what, but I'll end up sharing that with you. But in short, there is a significant difference. Now, I'm not going to get too lengthy into all the different possibilities, but note that d6 does allow for this e5 possibility, whereas if black is playing e5 right now at this very moment, that right there is, of course, ruled out. So black is giving white a now or never moment to go ahead and grab this pawn, or otherwise it's just going to be d6 and we have that nice compact structure in the center for black. So some of the things that I found with this d6 e5 pawn takes line is, after knight takes pawn, well, this isn't a good move, but it's not a good move because of queen to g5. But what I ended up finding is this queen d4 move is actually not good. This is something I thought would be perfect for black. It seems just also appealing, hitting the knight, hitting the rook, just pointing out a really interesting trap. There's bishop to b2 of all moves. I was completely caught off guard when I was reviewing for this game. After bishop b2, queen takes bishop, knight c3, all of a sudden the queen is running very short on squares. Having just these two highlighted squares available, knight c4 is available, threatening the trap of the queen. And if, let's say, bishop plays here, there's something like rook b1, queen here, and after a silent but deadly move, queen f3, threatening f7 and c6, black is toast. Another quick line involves, after, let's say, queen a3, still this queen f3 move, and even though black is up a minor piece, the threat of grabbing on f7 and c6, black is definitely running for the hills. So anyhow, just a quick trap that I came across that comes about from this particular line. Instead of e5, instead if we have d6 and then e5, an interesting thing that I ended up finding again as I was reviewing the game. It would not be a good idea to run with knight takes at this moment because of queen to g5, and it certainly gets very messy. But there is a positional compensation still at this point. Instead of grabbing that pawn on e5, there is this d6 move, and then trying to take advantage eventually of this queenside structure. Maybe have something like these knights trying to pile up on the c5 pawn, etc. But anyhow, one little wrinkle that I recognized as I was reviewing the game, one of the differences between e5 immediately and d6. So anyhow, after b3, e5 is played, and Anand does go ahead and grab that pawn, and we have a very forcing continuation. Queen e7 hits this knight, bishop develops, defends, and this pawn has a lot of fun these next three moves, hitting the knight in each case. After d6, the knight runs to c4, and now note that just taking right here, well, this knight's going to be trapped. It has to go here, and it'd be a case of a minor piece for three pawns, but it's better for black, even though the point value is balanced. This is better to have the minor piece in this case. So we don't have that. We don't have knight takes on c6. Instead, the knight runs to c4. Again, the d pawn presses forward. d5, knight is hit again. There is no takes. This pawn is pinned. The knight now deciding to go to e3. e5, knight e5 was another option, and things, I believe, would get much messier. So I think just playing a more solid move with knight to e3 at this point instead. This pawn's still running down these last three moves, each giving a threat to that knight. Finally, it can find a home on the c4 square. Now, it's important to recognize this right here. Why go with d4? Why not, let's say, capture this pawn? Well, what's going on here? Well, after, let's say, castle, this queen is accessible to the white pieces. You could see, let's say, knight c3 right away. You could see rook to e1. In short, black is way behind in development and runs the risk of getting killed very soon, this king being uncastled. So it's important not to run with just queen takes pawn right here, but instead run with a line that will force the queens to come off the board. d4 does just that, and after knight c4, queen takes pawn, queen blocks, the queens come off, and we already have an endgame after a dozen moves. And we still have an imbalance in the position, knight for bishop exchange. A cramped, well, not a cramped, but a messed up pawn structure for black, and white will maybe try to pinpoint this c5 pawn. This could turn out to be a target, and so black is going to have to take good care of that c5 pawn. So following up, bishop to e6, d3, preparing knight to d2, having these knights connected. More development on the black end. The knights are not connected for white. Black castles, and now castling artificially. The rook is playing to e1 so the king can be tucked back. This is what we see. After bishop e7, the king goes to f1, and now the black swinging over to the e file, just getting all the pieces working. Now, at this point, we have bishop a3, and white is just looking to put pressure on this c5 pawn. And in response to it, knight d5. If there is additional pressure placed on this pawn, well, we actually get to see that happening. Knight e4, there is this knight b4 move, counterattack, or I guess it defends against c5 and it's putting pressure on c2. Anand is in a good position to just watch over it conveniently. I say convenient because it's defending the pawn and still preparing to double along this e file, the only open file. Following up, we'd finally have black giving back that bishop pair, cashing in, grabbing that knight, and following up, preparing to now follow up with this f5 advance. So that's exactly what we see. We have b takes on c4 as the response. Now there's another option here for white. They could go with d3, capturing away from the center. You really better have a good reason to capture away from the center, and I'm not seeing a good reason to do that. One reason is, why even allow black the possibility at some point, not saying right away, but at some point to maybe play d3? Why not just rule it out altogether? Another way to maybe view it is that you're, by capturing towards the center, by capturing with the b pawn, you are allowing for your knight to take up a semi-active post on the b3 square. I say semi-active because, okay, in an ideal world in the center, that would be the most active. You could rely upon a home in the center. b3, it's a reliable home, but it's a bit offsides. So in just a couple of moves, you could see it getting there, pivoting first on d2. So as a follow-up, we now have f5, kicking this knight back. In fact, it doesn't go back right away. We have an in-between move. Going to d2 drops this c2 pawn. So it's important to first insert bishop takes knight, and then after pawn takes bishop, now knight to d2, getting ready for that b3 square. Now, what's interesting is how important it is to not try and go with these in-between moves. For example, something like pawn takes knight right here, I believe is turning out to be a forced loss on black. It may seem, it might be hard to maybe picture that, but I do want to touch on how clean of an approach it could turn out to be for white if black is to run with this pawn takes knight. The continuation would be bishop a5, hitting the rook, pawn takes, the rook is needing to bump up, and now this is a very difficult bind that black is finding themselves in. How do you get out of this pin? You can't move the bishop, the rook is dead. Black is going to have to reorganize the pieces like so. Rook b7, king d7, and then bring this rook back so then the bishop, is in a position to move. But the sad thing for black is that even if the bishop moves, what then occurs is that both sets of rooks come off the board, and the resulting endgame is just bishop and pawn, and these guys are perfect opposite this dark square bishop, and basically these three pawns negate four black pawns, and the attention turns towards this king side, 3 versus 2 majority. How might things run? Something like f4 king here, just getting these pawns rolling, and eventually this guy's going to have to move. There's nothing more to do. Both rooks are just tied up, and we could have something like this, a 3-2 majority, the king sneaking in. This is a one position for white. These pawns are controlling squares from this black king, and again, it's a 3-2 majority. The king makes progress in the center, and it's going to turn out to be a loss for black. So anyhow, something to be aware of, how one off move could really just find yourself in a complete bind, and there's really nothing that you could do. You try to wriggle out of it, but even if you get to a pretty decent position, simplification occurs, and again, this 3-2 majority is very telling. So anyhow, this is just a hypothetical here, but there's not that in-between move that is played on the black end. We just have the c takes b. Now the knight goes back to d2, bishop d3, the pair of rooks comes off. After knight b3, pressure on d4, we have c5, and now after a3, there's nothing really to do. Both players shake hands at this moment. We have yet another draw in this match running in for, well, we just have 2 more games remaining at these FIDE time controls. If things are level after these 12 games, we'll head into a rapid time control, a group of 4 rapid time control games. Now, after this A3 move, if you're wondering why might this game be a draw, well, there's not really a whole lot of progress that could be made. Let's say after pawn takes, rook takes, king b7, what do you do? Well, one thing I could say is that white needs to be careful about not exchanging the rook. Having both rooks off the board, this is going to be good, very good for black, because this guy is passed, and a knight hates having to defend against rook pawns in particular that are passed. But that's not going to happen. The rooks will not come off the board. It'll be a case of the rook just keeping a close eye on this pawn, the knight already observing it. And there's just really one accurate move black would be needing to make in this simplified endgame. Making a move like king to b6 is not correct because of rook check, king here, knight a5, and after the king comes here, there's rook check. But the accurate move, the accurate defense at this point, should this game have played out beyond just move 3 and the shaking of hands, if it had played out, this is what we would have as an accurate defense. Not king to b6, but rather rook c8. And now if there's a check, king here, and if there's a check on a5, the king can play here, and note the difference by having the rook on c8 opposed to e8. It's in a position to meet rook b7 with rook to d7, and there's not really anything more to do to make progress. Again, white is the side who needs to avoid the rook exchanges, so this rook would have to go elsewhere, and there's just nothing more to get out of this position. And so as it stands in this game, after just this a3 move, both players agree to a draw, and we move into just having 2 games left, each player having white 1 game, and we'll see how things finish up. So as always, I hope you got something out of this video. Take care.